Privet, Katila, ja, well, Oshiharasho, because today we're going to be talking about the 2020 election with my fellow friend and fellow YouTuber PoliDice. How's it going?
It is going well.
Yeah, so we are we kind of wanted to discuss so this is around the time in 2016 when Donald Trump officially announced, and he this is when the ball started rolling. So this is kind of traditionally time when things actually start coming around. So since we're starting the primary season, essentially, it's I guess we should ask kind of what our thoughts are. And so I'm kind of I'm an independent. I consider myself that. I have some right wing ideas and some left wing ideas, but and PoliDice is a social democrat progressive. So we kind of have a bit different perspectives, or maybe a lot of similar perspectives. I would assume, actually, but we both kind of have our own kind of views, and we kind of want to discuss how we think this election is going to come by. So how do you I don't know where to start. So how do you think of what do you think of the Democratic candidates so far? Is this what you like? How did you, when you were with this election coming up, what were you was this amount of candidates what am I trying to say? What are you trying to how do you think about the Democratic candidates so far?
I think that there are a few really good candidates. I would say that about half of them are meh, just okay, not great, not terrible, and then a good chunk of them are garbage.
I break down the candidates the Democratic candidates into three sections. I break down the ones who actually have a chance, the ones who don't have any sort of chance whatsoever, but they have a vision. They're running for because they have a vision. Like, for example, Andrew Yang, he has he actually cares about what he's talking about, but he's not. I don't think he's gonna win. And maybe Marianne Williamson, because she had and then the third tier, which is people who are just trying to raise their profile. They know they're not going to win. They're just oh, maybe I'll get a cabinet position or something like that. And it doesn't have to some people might be they could be in each two of those categories, but I kind of divide the Democratic candidates into those three categories. And I think but there's a lot of these so how about you tell the people what you kind of what candidate you're supporting, and kind of what and why?
So before I get to that, kind of what you were talking about with the three tiers of candidates, I would say there are more like four.
Mm-hmm.
So in the tier one, you have the heavy hitters, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, Buttigieg, and then in the second tier, you have the ones who are they have a decent chance, but they're probably not going to win. And then in a tier three, it's kind of a 1% chance. And then in the fourth or bottom tier, there's a 0% chance. I'm just calling it now that they have no chance. They should drop out.
Do you want to say which candidates do you think are just completely useless?
The ones that are completely useless, John Delaney, whoever that is.
Wait, who are you talking about?
John Delaney, whoever that is.
Yeah, who else?
Eric Swalwell.
God, he's such a nerd.
And then the four people who didn't make the debate. So Mike Gravel, Wayne Messam, who is Seth Moulton, I think.
Seth Moulton, and then Steve Bullock.
Steve Bullock didn't make the debates?
I don't think so. Some random bozo named Michael Bennett joined. I didn't know who the hell that was. I thought I was a political junkie because I knew who Seth Moulton, Steve Bullock was, but apparently Michael Bennett came out of nowhere. I don't know who he is either, but they're probably more irrelevant than John Delaney. I think John Delaney has a bigger chance, and that's saying something.
Bullock, I'm surprised. Well, it's let me. I have a list somewhere. One sec. One second.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so
okay, so the four candidates who didn't make the debate. Oh yeah, you're right. Steve Bullock. Okay, so Steve Bullock, Mike Gravel, Wayne Messam, and Seth Moulton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're not getting anywhere. I don't think you remember this, but they're going to be like Jim Gilmore. Do you remember Jim Gilmore from 2016 on the Republican side? You probably don't.
Yeah,
But
he was the one who was getting like by far the least amount of votes, but
he was so irrelevant, he couldn't even make the kids table debate.
and he wouldn't drop out. Like it was like the primaries were like there were already a few primaries that had been held, and he wouldn't drop out.
He
And
was Yeah, he was not registering in any poll. He just like stayed. But again, it's probably, as I said, it's probably a lot of these people are trying to like raise their profile. Like, for example, I would have put in the beginning like Pete Buttigieg. I think he wanted to be more bigger presence in Indiana or something, but then he didn't. I'm kind of surprised. Why do you think? Why do you think Pete Buttigieg like rose so fast in the polls? Like a few I'm gonna ask two questions. So first about Pete Buttigieg is like, why do you think he raised in the he was he like jumped so high in the polls from like 1% to someone who's like almost as irrelevant that no one knew about to like one of the top tier candidates who was in the top 5 or top 6.
he's very articulate. He has a lot of the stuff the media was talking about where there are all these like cool traits about him. He is conventionally handsome, and also like because he's gay. I think that a lot of people. I know that shouldn't be a huge factor, but like for a lot of people, I think that really helps get his attention. And
Yeah.
he is really good at being kind of like a Beto O'Rourke, kind of like, you know, people like him for his like style, but like he doesn't really have very much substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he really stole Beto O'Rourke's thunder because
Yeah. Yeah,
well,
Beto O'Rourke is like at 2% now or something. He's like crashing.
yeah, because Beto O'Rourke, like he was the stylish. I remember somebody said that Beto O'Rourke was an empty suit without the suit.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pete Buttigieg is better at being Beto than Beto is. So like Beto was just like totally ousted by Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, who do you think's better, Pete or Beto in your opinion?
Pete, but by like a very small amount. Like they're really about the same.
Yeah. So for me, I kind of think that the two people I just absolutely just despise, or just don't like at all. There's some people who are just irrelevant. I just don't think about. They're not on my mind. But the two people that kind of register. So there's Eric Swalwell and John Hickenlooper. Now, John Hickenlooper is like some sort of like complete airhead. I don't know what the hell he's like running for. He's like every time everything I've seen him speak, I've gone to his website. Like I can't even articulate what exact. Like I don't like the left wing in the Democratic Party. I did very good stuff in Colorado. Please elect me. Like I don't know anything that he's running on. He's some sort of like he's like I don't like the Bernie Sanders left. I liked what I did in Colorado, and it just there's nothing to him. He's like some sort of like gaslight, but Eric Swalwell was like this very like cartoonish idiot. He just comes off as I know this is like a right wing meme, but he comes off like literally as like some sort of like soy person. He's just such a you know just did he see the Iowa? He's like I see ourselves as the Avengers,
Yeah,
and we're fine.
I tweeted about that. That was so cringe inducing.
He's like, and then he's like, I will be the bull. Or what was it? He's like, I will be bold without the bull. And he like waited for like 10 seconds and no one clapped. And then fucking
But don't forget, he can change a diaper. So we
yeah. I saw that. The first time he came up on my radar, someone asked him, so he wants to like buy back all the so-called assault weapons. And someone's like, well, what if people like, don't want that? Like someone put like a hypothetical, like, well, what if they like fight against you for that? And they're like, he's like, well, the American military will just nuke everyone who resists. I'm like, yeah, he's just such a, yeah, he's such a bozo. But so I don't like Eric Swalwell because he's like some sort of like nerdish idiot, and John Hickenlooper is like this vassal of nothingness. But
so
yeah.
I actually remember like sometime in like 2018, I think there was actually a Democratic politician who got a lot of people upset by saying that, oh, if people fight back with guns, we'll just nuke them. Was that Swalwell?
Yeah, that was Swalwell.
Wow, I didn't. I had no idea that was him. Because that was so long ago that I didn't make the connection.
And the thing is, like, what he's running on is like his big thing is like I think guns, like the and then like the Russia election thing, and that's it. I mean, that's like the big like his big thing is like gun control and like the Russia investigation. And then when he talks about health, he's like, it's such a he kind of when you have to figure out about Democrats is that you have to kind of look between the lines of what they're saying because they say the same stuff, but you have to kind of dissect what they mean. Like in healthcare, the New York Times recently asked them a few questions, and it's like, do you think would you improve the Affordable Care Act or replace it with a single payer? And every single one of them, even like he's like, I believe healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and I support Medicare for all, and that means lowering the eligibility age to 50 and making. But it's like they understand that they can't. They're trying to make single payer or Medicare for all to something that it's not. They're trying to like, oh yes, I believe in universal healthcare. Ooh, but they don't actually believe in it. And I mean, I at least respect people who are like, at least John Hickenlooper was like, well, I don't like single payer. I'm like, okay, at least I know where you stand. Everyone else is just kind of like mealing mouth, like they know where the party, at least the Democrats are. So they're just saying like, oh yes, I believe healthcare is a right, and then they never say exactly what they're gonna do. Surprisingly, a Warren, a lot of people say she's really progressive, but I don't know. She said, I don't know, is she for Medicare for all? Because every time I see her, she always says, well, we need a pathway to Medicare for all. I don't think she's for it, even though I heard she's really like aggressive.
A lot of people are very understandably frustrated that, Elizabeth Warren, she is very, very policy oriented, very specific. But when it comes to healthcare, she's just like, oh, we're going to get everyone to the table and then we're going to figure out what works for everyone. And
she's very like bold. She's like, we're going to abolish student loans and we're going to like, make $100 billion opioid epidemic fighting project. And we're going to do, this massive housing, like this $500 billion housing and infrastructure project. And then she's like, oh yeah, for like healthcare, it's like, there's some way we could lower the age. She like becomes like fucking, she like falls apart. So I think, because that's the thing about, the one thing that I'm solidly left wing on is single payer healthcare. Like one thing I wanted to say is a lot of people, so Bernie's one part of Bernie's plan for one way he could raise taxes to fund for the Medicare for all is that everyone pays like 2 to 3% of their income in taxes. So even in the middle class, so people could get like healthcare paid for. And the way I kind of think about it is like we all pay like 7%. So, I'm very young. I'm like, I'm 18. So, I'm paying 7% of my income into a program, Social Security, that I won't use for half a century. So 7% of my income is going to something I won't use for half a century. Would I be willing to pay like 2% more of my income, knowing I don't have to mess with all this bureaucratic nonsense and that I could just go to any doctor I wanted, which is, I go in and everything just covered. There's like no sort of co-pays or deductibles, or at least they're like extremely low, like $10 or something like that. Yeah, I totally do that.
So if I recall correctly, in Australia, they actually do that exact thing. They call it a Medicare levy, and that you pay 2% of your income as the Medicare levy, and that's how they pay for their single payer system.
Yeah, I mean that's I feel like that's kind of how they do it because in Scandinavia they the way they raise a lot of taxes is that the top rate is high, but the top rate kicks in at a much lower rate than our rate does. I think it kicks in like everything above $80,000 or something is subject to like 50% tax rate or something like that, I believe. But so it's like everyone pays in, but then everyone gets benefits out, and due to the since that brings in a lot of money, and the money is disproportionately used to help the middle class and the poor. And then that way there's actually a net increase in benefits for the middle class, even though the rich might pay more in taxes, which I support.
Yeah, so that kind of reminds me of Kamala Harris. So it's like in general, I think we should be focused more on increasing taxes and increasing services. So when Kamala Harris says that her number one priority, the first thing that she'll do, is a middle class tax cut, I'm like, I'm not against cutting taxes for the middle class, but I do much more support what you were talking about with the Scandinavian model, where everyone pays kind of like higher taxes, and the top rate is like an upper middle class thing. But it's like I think that in general we should be focusing on increasing revenue and increasing services. So
Yeah.
I would rather pay an extra like whatever percent in taxes if I saved more from that in terms of like healthcare premiums, or if we got like really good public transportation, or
If the government actually worked for us, like, because I think the reason why a lot of people don't want to, they're like, oh my god, they're going to raise taxes on me, is that they're kind of like, well, the government right now is completely incompetent, like they can't get anything done, and they're like, why would I want to give any more money to them? So I mean, I don't blame them, but if the government actually did something that's worth for them, like if they see something, oh man, like my taxes, I don't have to pay for my children's college tuition anymore, or I have to, they're giving me subsidies for pre-K, or having children or whatever, and not, or housing. It's easier to get a house or something like that, or for my healthcare. So it's like, if tangible benefits actually trickle down, I dare I say, down to the to the more middle class and all that, and the poor, they'll probably be more interested in actually paying more taxes. But there has to be a sort of there has to be a more solidarity thing around in America, because it's also a cultural thing that has to happen. Because right now we're actually, like, we're very polarized, I think, and I think that's also why it's very hard to get people together to actually pay more. Because, like, well, why don't want to fund other people's things? Because like, in Denmark, it's like a country of 6 million people who like all look the same and talk the same, and they all have the same worldview, and it's kind of easy for everyone to pay extra taxes. But it's kind of hard, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a lot harder, I would say, in America to have a more cultural mindset of solidarity, even though we're like so different and all that.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk. It's funny. People on the right, they talk about oh, the left needs to stop calling us selfish for not wanting to pay taxes. But Charlie Kirk was having the debate with Sam Cedar, and there was a moment where he said, "Oh well, why should I have to pay for something that won't benefit me?" So Sam Cedar like pretty much proved to his face that single payer healthcare would be good for the overwhelming majority of people, would save people money, would like he proved to be the better system. And then Charlie Kirk was just like, "Oh well, why would I pay for something that will help other people?"
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like the thing. The one thing I get really mad about is when people talk about how socialism is essentially when the government does stuff, and the more the government does stuff, the more socialistier it is. And that just gets really on my nerves, because it's like that's not socialism, unless, because it's like, I don't want to pay for anyone else's stuff, but it's like you're paying for everyone's like security with like the military and the police. People just don't take it for they just don't, I guess, put two and two together and all that,
And they're also paying for themselves, because even if they're young, healthy, affluent, like they could, like, actually, speaking of Charlie Kirk, he did have a medical incident. So it's not like this stuff isn't going to benefit you as well.
Mm-hmm. So going to the 2016 election. So who do you want to win for the 2020 election? Like, who's your favorite candidate?
Bernie Sanders by far. Well, not by far, but like by enough for me to easily say Bernie Sanders. He is the most solidly committed to progressive stances. I think that he would do a good job against Trump. My only issues with him would be the age, and I think that the fear mongering about socialism actually could be an issue for him in the general.
Yeah.
But overall, it's definitely Bernie Sanders who's my favorite. I think that he has the most comprehensive. Well, I guess the comprehensive would be Elizabeth, or at least she has the most specific plan. But Bernie Sanders is the most comprehensive in terms of here's where I stand. This is what I believe in, and people agree with this. And so we're not entirely sure how Elizabeth Warren feels about healthcare, but Bernie Sanders has been calling for Medicare for all for decades.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about him is that like even if I don't agree with everything he says, I know like what he'll do if he comes in office. A lot of people like I was reading a few articles and like a criticism they says like, oh, he's like a broken record. He says the same stuff. It's like that's good because he's actually committed to a vision and has a policies that I know he'll push for. Now because that's the one thing that's why when I rank Bernie, even though I might not agree with everything he says, I really love his consistency, and like I know like he's actually cares. He has like he wants the best. Well, I can't say that for like almost like 90% of the Democratic field, who are either, I mean, even if they do care, like even if they have like convictions, they're just kind of running because they kind of want the power, I think. The one thing that kind of soured me on democracy in general is that what we have in America is we have this like unelected, like forgive me to sounding boomerish for a second, but we have like some like a deep state in a way that there's this like the intelligence apparatus, the military industrial complex, the special interests and the corporatists and the lobbyists and presidents come and go and a Democrat comes out, oh, I will pass a tax law that will raise the marginal rate from 35 to 40%. And the Republican came in, I'm gonna, and then the Republican comes in, he like repeals the Mexico City policy, and then it's just like tweaks around the edges, like, but by and large the system's maintained in place, and there's no sort of and the because Trump got elected. Trump, like, people would think that that'd be some sort of signal that things are like people don't want this shit to stand, but he got elected, and despite Trump's all this thing, he's going to do all this, he's kind of hasn't done anything. And I think one thing I'll say is, I think one thing that I guess is a bit of a downer, I'll say, is that no matter, even if Bernie gets elected, I don't think he's going to implement his entire policy thing. He might be able to change like one major thing maybe, but I kind of doubt that anyone who gets elected is going to actually change the system. I'm kind of starting to sour on the idea that it might be, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I don't understand how that would sour you to democracy. It sounds like you would want things to be more democratic and more transparent.
Well, it's just like our current system in democracy is that the people, because the thing, like we want, like, because even if there's like a total like wipeout, like let's say Bernie Sanders like takes the entire election, like there's like this huge populist wave and everyone goes back behind like a singular candidate, and then when he comes in, there's people who are trying to like throughout the bureaucracy that is the government, want that might sabotage him along. Like for example, I think you've seen, like for example, Trump. If you read a lot of things coming out of the White House, Trump actually doesn't like want to go to war with Iran. He's like, well, why is there so much hostility now? And he doesn't know what's going on because he's a blumbering idiot. But he but then like what's happening is that a lot of people that he's hired, like Bolton and all these people, are undermining what he's supposed to be. There's people just that are that unless we change the system profoundly, then I don't know how at the current rate how American, at least the way the American democracy is now, could help, how do you say it? Maintain something that like that, where when we try to elect people that they're actually going to change things, because it's kind of like we think that they're going to change things, but even if they go, like even if Donald Trump gets elected, someone like that, and then he's not able to do anything, it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I guess yeah.
Yeah, so I agree that the system needs to be like systemically reformed in many ways, but it would be a way that where it's more democratic and more transparent, and it makes it so that one thing that definitely needs to be reformed would be the Senate, there's lots of discussion about ranked choice voting or runoff elections, lots of ways that we can have more of a, we can move away from the two-party system, and we can have more significant reforms. The main, so Bernie Sanders becomes president, the obstacle wouldn't be the deep state, because he would be appointing a lot of, so with Trump and Iran, That's largely John Bolton, and Trump picked John Bolton, but Bernie Sanders wouldn't pick John Bolton. He would pick somebody who would actually be more in line with his vision. And past that, the only really real issue would be possibly the Senate. It is. I don't know how much of it is about a fundamental flaw of the Senate, but it is kind of strange that instead of having like a general election for the Senate, it's like this very slow like every 6 years, and they're not the same 6 years. So it's like in some years you could have a case where the Senate election will favor the Democrats or the Republicans because there could be more Republicans up for re-election or more Democrats up for re-election, and also the Senate is massively undemocratic in terms of Wyoming and Montana getting the same representation as California and Texas.
Yeah, I think for the reason why I don't think one thing I'll say is that I don't think our system was supposed to be it was supposed to be as, I guess, like for example, the reason why I think there's like a Senate and electoral college is because we're like a federal state and not like a unitary state. In that, what I mean is that it's it's the United States of America. It's the states coming together to form a government. It's not. I think a lot of people tend to forget that the states were supposed to be kind of the building blocks of America, and that at least the way it was originally created is that the states were supposed to be where all the major decisions were made, and the federal government just kind of had a basic framework from which all the states could work together on. So that's why I think it was also made because the states are coming together and okay, we all have our own different points of view, but we're all coming together to make I guess a more perfect union. But we all there'll be a chamber where it's just for just by where everyone it's by votes, and then one by equal amount for each state. So that's why it's also the electoral college, because I don't think it was ever supposed to be democratic, but I mean, because it was supposed to take into account the different state issues instead of just like what the people wanted. So it was kind of like they wanted to take into account because we're a huge state. The people of Maine might be different from the people of Arizona. And then they have different issues. And even though, for example, the people of say Texas might be more numerous than the people in Vermont, but they both have different issues, and that's why there'll be a thing that will represent the people in general. That's as it represents, and then the specific state issues in the Senate, if you know what I mean.
So that made a lot more sense in terms of when the states were very completely fundamentally different. But in the past 50 years or so, and really since post-Civil War, but especially in the past 20, 50 years, the states have become very much homogenized. So a Democrat in Texas has a lot more in common with a Democrat in South Dakota than they do with a Republican in Texas. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I that's true. That's true. What do you think about for in terms of for the Democratic candidates? So the debate's coming up. So how the way it was structured, you saw where they the two candidate the 2-tier night thing and all everything. You saw that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you think the debates are going to go?
So some candidates I think have a lot of room to go up, and others can really only go down.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Eric Swalwell, we were talking about, he's going to go down hard. Don Hickenlooper is going to go down. And they're not even very high right now, so it's going to be sad watching them go from 1% to actually, are they even at 1%? One sec.
Nah, they're like 0. If you average things 0.6 or something like that.
Yeah. One sec. So, Real Clear Politics. Yeah, so Hickenlooper is at 0.3%.
Oh shoot! That's even worse than I thought.
Swalwell, actually, he's not even in the top 20.
How the hell?
Swalwell is not in the top 20 of Real Clear Politics.
Damn.
So he's at less than 0. So never mind then. So yeah, they're not going to go anywhere. Candidates who I think could do really well in the debates and go further: Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard. I think that they have a lot of room to go up. All of the other candidates, I don't think are going to go very far.
I think Kamala Harris, one thing I find about Kamala Harris, so I've seen her a bit of her when she's like a former prosecutor, and she, that makes her very, very, I think that's like the biggest, if it's not to Biden and Sanders, I think Harris, even though she's like in 5th place and all that, I think she's she's like, I think the dark horse candidate in a way, because so she in the debates, I mean, I'll have to see how she debates, but the way she, I saw when she was I guess talking to Justice Kavanaugh, and she was like very like forceful, very like just very putting her word out, and very, I guess, not articulate, but like very, I guess, forceful, I should say. And she's, because she's a former prosecutor, and so I think she'll do well in the debates. And she's also relatively new on the federal, in the national stage. And then also, so she also checks all the identity boxes. She's a Black woman and all that, and she that would appeal to lots of, that a lot of demographics. She's also, I don't know about her age. I don't think age really cares about her, but she's also like, she has both the moderate and like, sometimes she'll play to the progressive side, and then she also has that like moderate cred a little bit. And and she's also she's polling not at a place where people take her seriously, but like not so high where the media will scrutinize her. So while people do get out of the top, she'll raise to the top. It's kind of like what happened in the GOP in 2008 and 2012, where Mitt Romney and John McCain were kind of like 3rd or 4th place. And then, the Republicans kind of flirted with like Rick Santorum or some other person, like some more farther right person, but then they settle with some establishment person like that. I think I think Harris might, we might have to like watch out for Harris.
Yeah, I think that in general, Kamala Harris is going to be, like, obviously I can't predict, but I think that she will not go down. I think that she'll get some delegates I think that she will get some delegates. I think that she's a very skilled politician. I think she's very charismatic. I think she's very strong-willed. I do think that she will go places. Yeah. So she is in that tier 1 that I was talking about earlier. And Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, I think that the reason I listed them as the ones who will go farther is that their main issue is a lack of exposure. Whereas, there are some candidates who have lack of exposure, but there's nothing to expose. Like they're like, so for example, no one knows who Eric Swalwell is, and once they know who he is, they still won't care. Yeah, for them, it's nowhere to go but down. Speaking of nowhere to go but down, Joe Biden, his polling number has fallen to 31.9%.
Yeah. So I think his post announcement bump has eroded away. But he's kind of back to where he is. I'm kind of more worried about Sanders, because he's especially now that, that's another thing I wanted to ask is, why do you think Elizabeth Warren all of a sudden is surging? Like, a lot of people say it's because she's putting out a bunch of detailed policy, but like, she's been doing that since she like not nominated, like she, since she like said she was going to run in the beginning of this year. So why now? Like, why do you think she's getting, what do you think specifics making her rise at this moment? Because that's the biggest question for me, because I don't know.
If I had to guess, I would say that as time goes forward, like, people will care less and less about the that stupid Native American fiasco where she said that she was Native American and then she took a DNA. I thought that was like the dumbest scandal ever. And I think that the more time goes by, the less people will care about that, and they'll realize that, oh, hey, she actually does have some good ideas, and she is a largely viable candidate. And so she will continue to gain support, I think.
Do you think she's going to be like a threat to Sanders? Because it seems like Sanders is starting to went down for a little bit as Warren surged. Do you think she's going to overtake him, or do you think Sanders will still remain as the main progressive candidate?
I'm not sure because we've gotten to the point where Sanders is only 3.1 points ahead of Warren, and I didn't think that Warren would actually get to the point where she could eclipse Sanders, but it might happen because Bernie Sanders has been going down for the past month or so. And Elizabeth Warren has just been climbing up. So if that trend continues, I don't know if it'll continue or not, but if that trend continues, then Elizabeth Warren could actually become the new second place.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the debates. Now, for Elizabeth Warren, I don't think she's really I mean, she's very wonky, and that's why I actually love her, because she's really like, that's the best thing I like about politicians, is like new ideas that actually change lives, are actually good ideas, but like, very wonky, very like in detail ideas. And that's why I really give Elizabeth Warren a lot of credit for a lot of things she's putting out. But like, I I don't know if she's a good, like, I think in the debates. So the thing with Bernie also is that, I mean, wait, do you think Bernie is a good debater? But
yeah, I would say so. He is. Yeah,
because I remember back in 2016, I thought like, okay, so right now Bernie is a little bit behind Hillary Clinton, but once the debates comes on this fall, the people are gonna be awoken by his like wokeness, like by his like progressive firebrand thing, and I think he's going to everyone's gonna like flock to him, and Hillary's gonna crash. But like, I don't remember, like, I don't think things changed that much, even though the debates came back and forth. There has to be like some. I mean, maybe we're putting too much stock on if debates do things, but like right now things haven't changed much, except Buttigieg rised, O'Rourke crashed because of that, and then Warren's now surging, and that's kind of crashing Sanders a little bit. The reason why I think Sanders might be a little bit in trouble is that Sanders represented in 2016 everything that was. If you want something change, if you want like a big change in the Democratic Party, Sanders is your guy. It doesn't matter what flavor you are, if you're extreme far left or regular left, left wing, or just any sort of different. If you're a socialist or just a progressive or just anything, everything under this. If you wanted if you were against the establishment, if you wanted something different, you were for Sanders. But now that now that everyone has essentially copied his platform, even though you might say they're lying about it, and now that there's many more different options and everything like that, I think Sanders is kind of, I guess, and since everyone knows who Sanders is now, and a lot of people are like sour about him. A lot of like former Hillary people, because they think he like threw her under the bus, even though he tried to campaign for her ever since he dropped out from the Democratic race in 2016. But I feel like Sanders's time is, I don't know, seeing the numbers as they are right now, unless he sometime maybe retakes the mantle as like the major change candidate against I don't know. I feel like it's gonna be harder for him in the primary this year than 2016.
possibly. I think that another big reason that Elizabeth Warren is catching up is that she's been doing very well in the the CNN town halls and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that she's been doing actually a better job than Bernie Sanders in a few of them. I know that people were very upset by Bernie Sanders saying that convicted felons should be allowed to vote while they're in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that another thing that happened in 2016 that's kind of happening again is that people have this perception that whether this is for whatever reason they believe this or whatever, maybe it's the media or whatever, but they're under the impression that a centrist candidate is the best for the general. So in 2016, it seemed like people liked Bernie Sanders more than Hillary Clinton, like overwhelmingly, but they supported Hillary Clinton because they thought that she was the more serious candidate who could beat Trump. And then, oops,
Yeah.
it seems like that's going to happen again. The difference though is that there actually is reason to believe that it was funny in 2016, people were saying that Hillary Clinton is the one who can beat Trump, but all the polls were showing that Bernie Sanders was the better choice against Trump. But in 2020, the polls are actually showing that Joe Biden is a slightly better matchup against Trump. Except that I actually don't think that'll last because Joe Biden he is very prone to fucking up. And he's had these weird pictures where he's like weirdly touching people, and he flips on issues when pressure is applied to him, and he has a record of that more people learn about his conservative voting record, the more they're alienated by him. So I think that Joe Biden really is going to continue plummeting in the polls. I don't think that like honestly I would say that Joe Biden has a less than 50% chance of getting the primary, and I don't even think that he's necessarily the best candidate against Trump, because remember he was his campaign had the idea that we should do minimal exposure or whatever they said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they wanted to, which actually I've actually seen that in action every time they like take like a lot of these like newspapers bring out questions to the candidates or like, hey, what's your opinion on this? Everyone answers, and Biden like never answers anything at all. He's like very I mean, it's excellent, as I mentioned before. It's like something Harris is doing pretty well because you know she's in, even though Biden's it's harder for Biden to pull it off because he's at the top. You know, he's the top front runner. Harris is it's the same thing with, he's trying to not get so much media scrutiny. It's like, okay, let everyone just battle it out, and I'll just like swoop by and then just claim the nomination. You know. That was how it was supposed to be for in 2016, but then they didn't expect Bernie to come out. It was supposed to happen with Hillary, you know. But I think Biden's why do you think Biden is so loved by the Democrats at the moment, or what it seems to be, as the front runner, and why do you think he does so well against Trump right now?
Because he was the vice president under Obama.
Do you think it's like they just want that like nostalgia and all? They just kind of think it's like that. It's like a return to some sort of other. I guess he's like the man. I guess what you're saying is true, is that he kind of represents the representation of kind of going back before Trump, and people are like, well, that's what I want and all that. But but once people know, like, oh, but I'm not voting for Obama, I'm voting for someone else. You know, maybe that is when he, you know, and his gaps won't help him. But so, you know, it is possible for him to like tank and all that. But you know, it really depends on what I think it just really depends on like how they do in you know, once people get more, as people become more in tuned with the primary, and once we know how they do on the debates, we'll kind of know how things are. And so because I think by the end of the summer, once everyone starts, it's the primary season is in full swing, and you know, people have been seeing them in debates for a little bit, and you know, then by then we'll know like if it will mostly just take like some sort of like cataclysm for someone to like collapse if they say something stupid. But that's when people will get used to all the candidates, and which will be in like maybe 2 months or 3 months. Then that's when we could maybe make more of a definitive like where people stand. But right now, I think Sanders and Trump, the reason why they're so on top is because they just, those are the people, they just know who they are, and they just kind of like, oh, I don't, because surprisingly, like no one know this, but from what I read at least, is that the second choice for Biden voters is Sanders, and I think the second choice for Sanders voters is Biden, which is really weird.
There was a study recently that showed that when people were asked pick the candidate who is most likely to beat Trump, they would choose a white male candidate. So I think that there is that is a factor in that people think like, oh, I'll pick the candidate who is most likely to win, and also the one with the most name. So ability against Trump, and also name recognition. So if people are just voting for or just picking whoever's name they recognize the most, it would be Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like they just kind of recognize them as like, oh, you know, they'll probably beat. Because I mean, the thing with Trump is that, you know, his unless apparently he thinks he's gonna flip like Nevada and all that, but because the thing is, if Trump loses these 3 states, he's screwed. If he loses Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which by the way he won by like the sliverest of margins, like very very small, like 1-2%. If that, it was like a few tens of like 80,000 votes in total between those 3, I think. but like it was very close, and if he and he will. I mean, he's going to lose to that. To either Biden or to any Democrat who actually is competent. Is actually somewhat populist. He'll lose that, and if he loses that, he can't get to 270. Because if I did some math, I think if everything stays true, if all the states stay the similar, and he loses those 3 states, he can't do anything. And I think he doesn't reach 2070. I don't think.
And we briefly mentioned the Electoral College earlier. I think that it's kind of ridiculous that the fate of the country will come down to a few swing states. And what you actually see when in 2016 there was a count of like the states that the candidates visited, and it was overwhelmingly the swing states. They didn't really pay attention to states that were solidly Democrat or solidly Republican, and not just those, but also Iowa is for the primary. It's like because Iowa always has the first primary, and then New Hampshire. Everyone's like, oh, who can do the best in Iowa and New Hampshire? I think it's really ridiculous that 2 states are given so much power in the primary.
Yeah, no, I think the way they yeah, I mean, everyone has to. I mean, how would you design the primary in your opinion? Like, how would you like kind of run the primary? Like, what do you think the perfect system for how would you make the primary run?
If you do the primary so I understand the value in having it done one state then another state, because that gives people in the other states the opportunity to see who is winning, who is more viable, and instead of just having it all done at once. I would decide randomly. So just 50 states or 50 states plus DC, you just randomly pick like which state would go when.
What would yeah for me, what's your perfect electoral system? Like you're the best Democrat, like your best, I guess, system of selecting leaders and all that. How would it be run?
So I guess there are 2 answers. If we're talking about a separate executive branch, then it would be like what they have in France, where you have the 5 most popular candidates from the 5 most popular parties, and then the 2 of them who get the most votes have a runoff. So kind of like the key thing there is that there's a runoff election, so that people don't have to choose between or they don't have to ignore their favorite party. It doesn't have to be a 2-party system. But if the executive branch is not a separate branch, then it would be kind of like a national assembly or a parliament type thing, where you would have proportional representation. And so if 5% of people vote for the Green Party, then the Green Party gets 5% of the seats.
Yeah, I'd have that. And
then they would choose, and that would be really good in terms of like forming coalitions. And that way, a lot of people are concerned that 51% of the population could dominate 49%, but in a parliamentary system, you actually could have like 6 or 7 parties, and then a bunch of them could build coalitions. And
yeah, I get really like I really love like in the Netherlands they have like 20 different parties, and they're all like real unique, and they're like they have like 10 of them are able to reach the and there's also like there's like a threshold also, so like not the most lunatic party gets in power, but like it's like if you get more than, I guess, well, in America even then it's like there's not much. There's only like the Republicans and the Democrats, because I guess the next question I want to ask is, if we had a multi-party America, what type of parties do you think we'll see come up? Like, what type of parties do you think it'll, like, what types of multi-parties would it come up if that was possible?
So we would definitely have a conservative party, we would have a progressive party, and then a moderate party, and then a libertarian party, and then a really far left party. And I think we'd also have like a very far right party. I know I'm just saying like generic labels, but I do think that's how it would be. So
yeah,
we kind of already have that. I think it'd be very similar to like the European Parliament. So in the European Parliament, they have the establishment conservatives, the establishment progressives, the centre. Like they have like 7 or 8 main things, and then you have like the far left, the far right.
Yeah, I think also they'll be like they'll be their own, like every state will probably have its like own, maybe like Texas, if it was proportional representation, like, I think the way I'd like to see it is that, so in our House of Representatives, each state has its own, certain amount of like representatives, right? So people get to elect, and that state, residents of that state get a vote on, and it's based on a proportional representation. So 5%, let's say 10%, and you'll get some wacky parties too. So like, for example, let's say in Texas, maybe say 7% of the people vote for like a Texas secession party or so, like an independence party or something like that. Maybe you'll get like a party that has like, so 5% of the representatives from Texas will come from that party. So I think we'll have like kind of like how in England there's like a Scottish independence party. So we'll kind of have like different, like, since America's such a huge country, I think we'll have like different types of unique flavors of parties everywhere. But I think we all agree, even like no matter where we are on the political spectrum, that our current like two-party system is extremely just very, I don't think takes into account like the wide diverse amount of opinion and thought that is in America. So I think I really much prefer like a multi-party kind of proportional representation type thing.
Definitely, but the thing you mentioned with state parties, I don't think those would be very popular. I mean, in Scotland, there's like a huge independence movement, so that's kind of why that's popular. But you mentioned Texas. I think it's like less than 1% of, or less than 10% of Texans want to secede or something. And
well, I know. I'm just kind of saying that there might be like some different part. It won't be like the same party, all like same parties in each state. There might be like a different party in each state. I'm just kind of making some sort of abstract thought.
I think that in general, like conservatives in different states would largely vote for the Conservative Party, and progressives would largely vote for the Progressive. So I don't think it would be all that different, but I think that there would be multiple options. So actually, in the European Parliament, it's like that's kind of how I'm describing it. So conservatives in Germany and conservatives in France would both vote for the European People's Party or one of the far right parties. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I think the way it would break down, there'd be a center right party, would be like a liberal conservative. I'm going to use some European terms, but like it'd be like it would be kind of like the CDU in Germany or something like that, or the Conservative Party in England or something. There'll be something like that. There'd be a left wing party, which would be kind of run by, which would be like the CSU in Germany, or like some. I don't think it would be like Corbyn type. It wouldn't be like the Corbyn Labour Party, but it would be like a left wing, like a center left party. There would be, I think, a kind of broad centrist party that'd be just very like broad. That would be kind of small, but be like more centrist instead of like more solidly right or left. There'd be a Green Party and a Libertarian Party. I think there'd also be like a nationalist party. I think there'd also be like a socialist party. And I think there'd be probably, and I think there'd also be like specific like identity group. I think there'll be like a Black People's Party, maybe, like, who think the people who run for specific like maybe Black issues or something like that. Like the reason why I say that might be the case is, like, for example, in the Netherlands, especially with the America's history, I think there'd always be like for example, in the Netherlands, there's a recent part. So there's a in the Netherlands, there's a party called Denk, which is a Muslim party which advocates for like the rights of the minority, I think, Turkish population in the Netherlands. So even though they only make up like about like 5 or 6% of the Netherlands population, they have like a party in parliament. So I think especially in America, there'll be like maybe some sort of like other identity parties. I don't know how much, but I think there'd be like at least one or two or something like that. So that's kind of, I think, how it would break down in America, at least.
Possibly, but yeah, we're way off the topic.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's look back at the polls. So as they are stand now, how do you actually let's get to the meat and butter and whatever, or the meat and potatoes. Okay. Let's talk about the major candidates and how they could improve in the situation. Let's talk about Biden. So as he stands now, what does he have to do to and what's a way he could win the nomination? Like what's his pathway? What should he do?
Biden, it's kind of. I think that his campaign actually has a good strategy of the minimal exposure and just kind of focused on being like the serious, moderate, unifying. I don't honestly, I don't think that Biden will get the nomination. I really don't. But if he were going to get the nomination, I think that he is doing the correct thing right now. I just don't think it's going to work because it's not like Biden can suddenly be. It's not like he can pretend to be a progressive unless he does it like very slight. Actually, yeah, you know what? I think that maybe being slightly more progressive. I think that shifting a little bit to the left, being kind of Obama-ish, kind of because as it stands, Biden is arguably to the right of Obama and Hillary Clinton.
Oh
So
yeah, most definitely.
yeah,
I guess
so
I don't think even Biden's advocating for like universal health care. I don't even know what he's like he's almost like Klobuchar, like like Klobuchar or Hickenlooper, and it's kind of surprising that he's like the one that's all at the top.
yeah, I would argue that he's actually even to the right of Klobuchar. Like he's so, I think he's about the same as Hickenlooper, but yeah, I really don't want the nominee to be Biden, but I will vote for Biden in the general if it comes down to Biden versus Trump.
So, for Bernie and Elizabeth, how do you think they're going to reconcile each other? Because there's a tweet. Bernie like sent a tweet out, kind of calling Elizabeth Warren like a corporatist or something like that, and it's kind of like since Elizabeth Warren's now kind of coming into Bernie's territory, they're starting to get a little bit hostile towards each other. So, like, how do you think how can Elizabeth or Bernie be like, I guess, the left wing, the more farther left like champions for how do each of them respectively grab that mantle?
As for the tweet, I don't think that he was calling her a corporatist. I think that the tweet was him saying that corporatists are trying to rally to or present Elizabeth Warren as an alternative. I don't know if he was directly calling Elizabeth Warren a centrist or a corporatist. But to answer your question, I've been saying from the beginning that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren should be more cooperative, and I think that they could be a good unity ticket. Um, I don't know if you can like publicly say this, but maybe like a secret agreement where you could have like Sanders as president or Warren as president, and then one of them is vice president, and then like Tulsi Gabbard could be like Secretary of State. But I think they should be all three of them should be present at the debates, and then maybe like whoever does the best in Iowa would be. I think that I'm really worried that they're going to split the progressive vote because the progressive vote is maybe like 30 or 40% of the Democratic primary vote. And
Mm-hmm.
that if we could all unify behind one candidate, we could win.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's very unfortunate that um, Sanders and Warren could end up splitting the vote between each other.
Yeah, and then just because it seems like even though Biden's like the moderate candidate, none of the all the other moderates like Hickenlooper and Delaney and Gillibrand and the such are just irrelevant. They don't even crack 1%. And he's just dominating. So I think it's just we just have to see if once people's like, I guess, nostalgia of like the Obama years, kind of like, oh, I'm not voting for a third term of Obama, I'm voting for another person. And then if Biden just keeps like self exploding, then maybe people will like shift towards another person, but we'll have to see where they go. But it's also a thing with Sanders and Warren. I don't know how this is going to end. I think it's kind of, we have to just wait and see. Who do you think is going to make who do you think is the dark horse candidate in this race?
Well, it was Buttigieg, but he's not a dark horse anymore. Right now, I guess the dark horses again would be Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, because I do think that they are the candidates who will get a lot of appeal, even though they're not very well known. Like they have very little name recognition. I don't think that Marianne Williamson will go. I think that she's going to crash and burn. Um, I think that she'll do better than people think that she will. I think that she has she actually crossed the 65,000 donor threshold because she doesn't have very many supporters, but her supporters are very adamant about her. So
what is she? What is she even like running on?
It's like this weird, like almost spiritual type. Like I think that her description's like she's like a spiritual leader or something, and
That sounds so weird. She's gonna like realign our chakras or something like that for.
like healing or something. And I was really like she tweeted out something about vaccines, and she didn't really say, "Oh, vaccines are bad," but she was kind of like, "Oh, we should be allowed to ask questions," or maybe it was Bill Maher, but I'm like, okay, if you go out on stage and you come out as like an anti-vaxxer, you will lose so badly. But I don't think that she's an anti-vaxxer. I think that she's just kind of like a new age hippie type.
Yeah, I don't know what exact I don't know exactly what she's exactly for to be. I mean, it's just as again, I think all these people, especially Mir, I think for Williamson, it's like to a lot of these people, as we said earlier, is that they're trying to just run to like raise their profiles so they could run for maybe Senate or something for the future. Like for Pete Buttigieg, I think he wanted to maybe go for like maybe a congressman of Indiana or something, so he wanted to raise his profile or something. But then he realized he actually could do something. But he I think a lot of these people just kind of are either running because they know they just want to raise their profiles or they actually have a vision, as we mentioned before. Um, what do you think about how do you so how about for the in the 2020 election? Do you think so? I guess in the broad term, do you think Trump's do you think it's in Trump's favor at the moment or no? Do you think Trump's like? Do you think
No,
Trump or wait
I
what?
would say that Trump, just against any generic Democrat, has like a 40% chance of winning.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that generic Democrat has a 60% chance of beating Trump. So I think it's like 60-40. Trump could win the general. I think it's more like a lot of people have this mentality that 2016 was a fluke and that Trump will lose to anyone. I think that's very wrong. I think that there are several candidates who Trump could beat. So I think that this overconfidence is a problem.
Do you think it's also going to be a problem when if the Democrats are like fighting against each other, they're going to tear each other apart, and then
Oh yeah,
they'll.
that's always been my biggest concern is that Trump is going to have a unified Republican Party behind him. He'll have the incumbency advantage, and the Democrats will all be mad at each other, and they're going to tear each other down and smear. Maybe not smear each other, but I think that this is going to be a problem where already like anytime that I say on Twitter that no matter who wins the primary, I will vote for them. I get a lot of people who are telling me that, oh no, Joe Biden is just as bad as Donald Trump, and I'm like, okay, but that's factually not true. Like on pretty much every issue, Joe Biden is to the left of Donald Trump. Maybe there are a few issues where they're about the same, but overall, I think it's just people, they very much want their candidate to win,
Mhm.
and they might have a hard time letting go if their candidate loses, and that could be a problem in the general. Yeah.
I think what do you think would be the best strategy for the Democrats, and what would be the best strategy for Trump if they want to win in 2020?
The best strategy for Trump would be to not do anything stupid and just kind of continue to imply that the conventionally healthy economy is his doing, even though the unemployment rate's been falling since 2011. This is clearly something that he inherited from whether it be Obama or just the trend of the global economy. This was not something that Trump achieved, but if he can continue implying that he did it and that if he can fearmonger about socialism, I think that's his best strategy. I think the worst thing he can do is start a war with Iran. If he starts a war with Iran, I think that would be a. I think that some people think that that would help him, but I mean, maybe it might help him, but I think that that would be like kind
the
of
one,
shocking if he
the way that would only be true if it would be something like the Gulf War, for example, where like there's like this military operation that's like wildly successful and it completes itself in like half a year or something. But that's not going to happen in Iran unless he like I mean, I don't know what if he wants to start like a full out war with Iran. That's going to drag on for decades. So it's going to destroy him. But like obviously there's a grain of truth that like starting kind of like and ending a military conflict in an American success is brings up the approval of the president. But I think he's I know he's flattering, like faltering in the one thing I'll say is that so what Trump is so there's two Trumps. There's campaign Trump and then there's President Trump. Campaign. So did you see the tweet recently where Trump's like, "I'm going to deport all the illegal immigrants starting next week"?
Yeah, that was horrifying. Yeah.
I'm like, we're like, hello, yeah. That was his main, like, people forget that was his main thing that he was gonna run on. Like, that was his promise. Like, when he got elected in 2016, people were expecting him to like deport all the illegal immigrants. He hasn't done any of that. And I think a lot of people in the at least in the circles I run in the right wing, a lot of them, they're still like kind of like, well, Trump hasn't done anything for me. He needs to be, I don't know if I'll vote for him. But I think what's going to happen is that Trump's going to revert back to campaign Trump, and he's going to just campaign. He's going to be like, oh, he's going to talk, like, oh, I'm going to do this and that. He's actually going to talk a big game, but he's not going to do anything about it. So, I'm going to say with like 99% certain, he's not going to deport anyone. He's going to, or if he does do anything, he's going to be like, oh, if I'm going to start deporting everyone next week. And then when that deadline reaches, like, oh yeah, I just deported 5 like illegal aliens who like were murderers who are going to get deported anyway. So like, yeah, that's it. We just made that process a bit faster, deporting those 5 people. Okay, nothing has to happen anymore. So he talks a big game and then just never does anything. So I think he's a very big promoter of himself, a big promoter of his administration, but he just doesn't follow through. And that's why I think a lot of people are going to fall behind Trump because they think, oh, Trump is back. Trump is, we thought he was, he left us behind, but he's going to vote, he's going to run, he's for us now. But I kind of came to the realization Trump is just like a con man. He actually does. I think his instincts are correct in some levels, but I guess he's just incompetent and can't come through with them. So whenever Trump says something, I would take it with a grain of salt.
If you look at the stuff he was saying in 2016, like just looking back on it, it was really dangerous. He was taught like people forget like how much of a threat he was portraying himself as 2016. He was talking about defaulting on the national debt. Like that would be the Great Depression again. I think that he has become moderated now that he's in office. There have been several moments where it's been reported that Trump wanted to do something horrible and insane, but then his cabinet members talked him out of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that campaign Trump is a lunatic, but I think that luckily there are moderating forces in the administration that kind of control his worst impulses. But I think that it's still very dangerous that he has him in the first place.
I think what at least what the GOP needs in general, they need to embrace, I guess, this right-wing populist, because they need to redefine what it means to be a conservative, because that's this like a lot of these like traditional like knuckle brain Neanderthals. They're like, oh, what conservatism actually means is tax cuts and deregulation, and oh wait, why is no one wanting to be a conservative now? It's because like no one wants to buy your like your rich your elitist philosophy, which is just like, oh, which is essentially just like, oh, I don't. It's very there's nothing to it. There's nothing to the ideology. It's just tax cuts and deregulation and pro-war. There's nothing to it. And what we need to do is redefine what it means to be a right-wing populist. I want to be one of these like European right-wing parties, which which needs to, and we also need to call out people like, for example, the Koch brothers are working with a lot of are working to try to liberalize the immigration law so they could get more cheaper labor. So it's like you need to like get rid of a lot of these like Republican donors as well. But it's kind of hard because they control the Republicans as well. So you need to what the Republican Party needs to do is embrace a right wing populist agenda, which is immigrate. I made a video called where I of immigration proposals that I propose to change. Which I labeled a patriotic New Deal, and they need to address immigration. They need to reorient our entire trade policy, make like an industrial strategy. They need infrastructure spending. They need to be combating the opioid epidemic. They need to be specific ways where they don't have to be left wing social democrats. They just have to be like, oh, we're gonna we're gonna. It's kind of like if I had to make some comparison to European parties, it would be like the Danish People's Party or the Polish Law and Justice Party, where they're not like libertarian on economics. They're very like interventionist. They're making economics where it serves the people. So, and the way the left could counteract the right wing populism is actually address what the voters need. For example, in Denmark. So, if you don't know, there was a recent election in Denmark. Where the right wing, the so-called far right wing populists, their support was cut in half, and the left wing actually won the election. Now, the reason why is because the major left wing party, the Social Democrat Party, adopted a ton of anti-immigration policies that they said they were going to implement. It cut the right wing parties in half. So, I think what the left wing needs to realize, at least in Europe, is and I think this is in America too, is that they don't want the people are, yes, they don't want to become like slaves to corporations, but they're also like, hey, I like my country the way it is. I want, for example, say in Denmark, they want Denmark to remain Danish. They don't want it to, they don't see themselves as cosmopolitan citizens of the world. They see themselves as like citizens of Denmark, which has a unique sort of identity that they want to preserve. And they don't want it to change into like something different that it is. So they're like, we don't like this massive change in how things are going, and we want to stop that. And if the left wants to, the best fusion is taking economic populism with, I guess, cultural populism, and then fusing it together. And that like is what I think attracts the most. That will be like the best winning strategy for the Republicans, at least. If they want to actually start winning.
For the Democrats, I don't think that would be a winning strategy at all. In terms of what you mentioned, like,
well, not for the Democrats. I think this is just for the GOP.
Okay, because you mentioned the Danish Social Democrats and how they kind of like adopt.
Yeah.
If the Democratic Party in the U.S. said that they would alienate like most of their voters, that wouldn't really work, because American progressives are a lot more open to immigration than. Perhaps I don't know how open to it the Danish progressives are, but I know that wouldn't work with progressives in the U.S.
Yeah.
The GOP, yeah, I agree that going like Trump's new campaign slogan is "Keep America Great."
Yeah,
and it's like, well,
that's essentially Hillary's campaign. He's like, America's already great.
Well, Trump is kind of trapped himself in a corner, because it's like in 2016 his whole thing was make America great again. Well, you can't say make America great again in 2020. Nor can you say keep America great, unless I mean, I guess that keep America great is
I think what he was thinking, I heard in like the beginning of 2017 he already came up with that slogan before he even got inaugurated. And I think his idea was that, oh, I'm going to do so much stuff. I'm going to change so much things in my first term that like when I run for a second term, I'm going to have so much stuff that like the people are like, oh, if you want to keep this progress up, if you want to keep this greatness up, elect me and I'll keep making it great, keep it great. But the thing is, you have to justify it. And in my opinion, I think you liked my tweet, which I kind of said that he hasn't justified that. To use that slogan. He hasn't said, he hasn't revamped immigration the way he said. He didn't pass an infrastructure bill or a change in healthcare or any sort. His biggest accomplishment is lukewarm, moderate criminal justice reform and like tax cuts for corporations and the rich. I mean, that's the biggest thing that he got out, and he and it's all he did is just ride the big, the economy. He hasn't really done much to, he's not the one who made this economy the way it is right now. And even I was going to get to it. The economy isn't actually as great as people say it is. Like, for example, the unemployment rate isn't the way they count unemployment is completely off. It's if you count actually like people who stopped looking, it's like 7 to 8%. And it's also a lot of these jobs that are getting created are like these low wage jobs. Tim Ryan of all people, when he was speaking at at the Iowa something, so I forgot what it was, but he's like, I don't want to create $15 an hour jobs. I want to create $30 and $40 an hour jobs in manufacturing and like these high wage jobs. And because we're coming to a point in human history where the biggest challenge of the economy is reindustrialization. We need what we're having is that we have the rich getting more and more out of all this technological progress, all this increased productivity, all this increased globalization, this increase in trade. Yet all the benefits of that haven't been trickled down to the average worker who's struggling to pay for healthcare and housing and raising a family and all that. And what the biggest thing for the economy is creating jobs that aren't just jobs, but like real jobs that pay $30 an hour, that people could like make, back to the day where it didn't take the mother and the father and like even all the children to work. You could have that when someone could even stay at home even, and it only took a single parent household or a single a breadwinner to actually do everything, because that's the way. And it's we want to bring back an economy that actually serves us. And GDP might go fine, but we have to ask ourselves some serious questions. Are we? And this is why I think I like Andrew Yang, is because he asks like, well, is the economy good if depression, if mental illness is on the rise, if suicides are on the rise, if drug abuse is on the rise, if the environmental quality is going down, like we have to ask ourselves, is that an economy that's actually right? And Trump is just like, I think this also goes back, is that Trump is just some sort of self-congratulator. He doesn't actually care. He just kind of like, oh yeah, the economy is doing good in the traditional market, so I'm just going to campaign on that because he just wants to build a big show about himself, but he doesn't actually care about that the economy is still, the fundamental underpinnings of our economy are still very bad.
Yeah, and if you go back to 2016, like Trump was actually, because the unemployment rate has been falling since 2011, and so back in 2016, Trump was saying that the unemployment numbers are fake. And so that's the thing that now he's taking that exact same trend and everyone's for it. As for bringing back the American Golden Age, I definitely agree that unions are a part of that, but I don't think that we can ever go back to like a 50s and 60s sort of thing, because the reason that we had that miracle economy was because after World War II, every other industrialized economy was ruined. So we were basically the main supplier for the entire world. So that's not going to happen again, but I definitely agree that we can rebuild American unions and everything. And you mentioned Andrew Yang. Is he your favorite candidate, or?
Let me look at all the candidates at one more time. Hold up. I like what he says. I don't agree with everything that he says. I just kind of, there's two sides that I see, is that either we have to reindustrialize and try to bring back actually high wage jobs and everything, or there's one where automation has come to a point where things are so automated that it just making new jobs doesn't count, because the robots can do them themselves. So it's either what Yang is at least talking about is we have to talk about that if people can't get a job, right, how can we reorient the economy so it works for, if people can't, because what will end up is that you'll have you'll have these rich people, who are these cosmopolitan global citizens who don't have any loyalty to any country, and they make they'll be worth trillions of dollars or hundreds of billions of dollars because of all this increased productivity and automation, and you know, and through this globalized kind of world order, and the people can, all you'll have, and then you'll have the bottom 90% living in like, in poverty, in very low, in they're not sharing in the wealth of that productivity, and they don't have jobs, and all they have is time on their hands. What's a recipe for that? That's a recipe for class warfare. So what Yang is talking about is that how do we reorient? We have to change the fundamentals of our economy, just as, for example, in the industrialization paved way for capitalism out of, like, I guess, mercantilism of like during the exploration and colonialism period. We're gonna have to like reorient our entire economic system, and that's why I think he understands that. He's at least bringing it up. But I think my favorite candidate, I don't think I have one at the moment. I again, for me, I'm still kind of undecided if I'm going to as I said, I like Bernie for his convictions. I like Elizabeth Warren because of her policy things. I like I like Yang because of aforementioned things I mentioned. I like Tulsi because of her foreign policy. I like there's just a lot of people that have their own unique things, so I don't think I'm stuck with one candidate at the moment.
So my favorite is, as I already mentioned, Bernie Sanders, and then after Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren and Tulsi Gabbard, and then after them, I guess Jay Inslee, and then you have the kind of like semi-progressive candidates who, people like Kamala Harris or Kirsten Gillibrand, who have kind of a progressive record in the Senate, but if you go back even further to where they were before the Senate, it's actually not very progressive. And then with Andrew Yang, I'm not really a fan of Andrew Yang because I think that UBI is an interesting idea, and I think that there is a case to be made for it, especially if automation really is going to take away everyone's jobs. But if you ask him about like wages, healthcare, and education, he actually comes across almost right wing, if anything. But I do think that he has several good ideas. I just think that when it comes to the big issues, Andrew Yang is too centrist or even conservative. But I definitely think that Andrew Yang is not the worst. Like, the worst would be like Joe Biden or John Delaney, whoever that is, or Eric Swalwell.
Yeah, for me, I think, because I think, yeah, I mean, surprisingly, you might think that the reason, I might agree with the freedom dividend. I actually, I mean, as you mentioned, it really depends on what he is, where he, about how desperate the situation is gonna happen, is coming, but like, for me, I don't think we're at that point just yet, but I think definitely in the future there'll be some sort of, we have to really reorient how our economy works. So I think at the end of the day, what people want is an economy that is, as I mentioned, there's this, there's people at the top who will benefit from all this automation, from all this productivity, from all this globalized trade, but the people at the bottom, they want an economy where they could own a house without going to Maastricht, where they could send their kids to, get an education, not go into huge amounts of debt, where they could get healthcare, where the infrastructure is great, where they could actually live in a clean environment that they could pass down to their generations. But I think people are generally, I guess, right wing. I don't think they see themselves as kind of like citizens of the world, where they're, these like high minded coastal elitist people. They kind of see themselves like, hey, I feel, I'm proud to be, I'm patriotic. I'm, I kind of, I'm a little bit traditional. I kind of, I'm not woke. I'm just a normal person doing normal stuff, and I don't want to be part of this. I think there's a mixture. There has to be. I think there's like a mixture, a grain of truth in every sort of ideology in a way. You know what I'm saying? So for the, let me see what another thing. So what do you think that the future is for the GOP and the Democratic Party in terms of like future elections?
Just based on current trends, I would say that the more time goes by, the more Republicans will be a minority of the population, and that means that they're going to have to become increasingly lucky to win. So if you look at the past two elections, like 2016, 2018, Democrats really won those elections in terms of like getting the majority of the population. However, in 2016 it was the Electoral College, and in 2018 it was the Democrats took the House, but in the Senate more Democrat seats were up for re-election than Republican seats. So the Republicans are really only staying in power because of luck and also because of stuff like gerrymandering and voter suppression. So I think that as time goes by, Republicans will become more of like a permanent minority, and also that Republicans will become more openly anti-democratic. We're already seeing this where conservative commentators are regularly saying that they want things to be less democratic, whereas Democrats are pushing legislation to make things more democratic, make it easier for people to vote. So I think that we are essentially, again, using current trends. We're at the point where we're moving into a majority minority type thing. However, the trends could change. Like the Republicans could steal one of the Democrats' key demographics. The Republicans could become more moderate. The Republicans there are ways to change this, but just based on the current trends, that is what we're moving towards, where we have a Democratic Party that has the majority of the population and wants things to be more democratic, more open, easier to vote, and the Republicans are a minority and they want to have more voter suppression and all that stuff.
In a weird way, as there was actually this argument that in a weird way the demographic trends in America, it actually is affecting the Democratic Party too. So I read somewhere that if it wasn't for so for the minority voters in 2016, that they're the ones who actually got Hillary Clinton over the edge. And if it wasn't for them, Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee. So it's kind of like they hold very huge sway already in the Democratic Party, and they're kind of. I guess the next question: why do you think, for example, like right now, if I remember correctly, the polls say that Black voters are really behind Biden? Why do you think a lot of as you mentioned before, I think naturally what's going to happen is that a lot of white Hispanics are going to become just kind of assimilated, and I think a lot of because if you look at immigrant groups, like especially Hispanics and the such, they're a lot more socially and culturally conservative than a lot of what the typical there was this a poll I saw about the border wall. White liberals are actually more opposed to the border wall than Hispanic or Black liberals, which I found really interesting. I found it very interesting, but I think there's going to be. It really depends on how the Republican Party embraces itself. Though the idea that it's going to become more moderate, there's a thing about like, oh, they have to embrace the Bush and all that, but like the Bush era and all that, like where they were like moderates and they weren't really Trumpian and all that. But I kind of there was a good tweet is like should the GOP like screw over? It's like I guess what Trump is trying to do is make the GOP kind of the party of the, I guess you could say, the traditional America, like the conservative white America or something like that, if you could say. And so should the GOP screw them over and get no minority votes, or try to like at least give lip service to them and then not get any minority votes at all anyway? Because I don't think the minorities are going to move to the GOP no matter unless with only like certain key demographics. But I think the Democrats are going to, at least in the foreseeable future, still maintain the hold for them, at least for the majority.
So a few things. The first thing you asked was why do I think that Joe Biden is doing well with African American voters?
Yeah.
I think that it's because people do see him as Obama's vice president, and of course Obama is very popular among mainstream Democrats. He's very popular among minority voters, And so I think that's where Joe Biden gets a lot of that cred. Even though if you look at his record, he is very horrible on minority rights. And I think that the reason that I don't think, I mean, I think that Joe Biden has a less than 50% chance of getting the nomination because I think that everything that he has going for him is kind of like a house of cards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people support him because they think he can win, but that's kind of like a bubble that can be popped. And you know, he has a lot of support from minority voters and mainstream Democrat voters. But I think that as people learn more about him in his past, he will kind of start to falter. And also, you were asking about what the Republican Party can do. I think that they really are in trouble because in 2012 the Republicans, you know, the Republican Party sent out a memo where they realized that okay, we need to do better at appealing to minority voters, and so a lot of Republican establishment types wanted Marco Rubio to become the nominee. But the thing is that you know in a democratic country you can't just have a top down. Here's what a party will believe because you know even if the Republican Party wanted Marco Rubio to win, the Republican primary voters wanted Trump to win. So the Republican Party, it's like I think that they're stuck because they want to kind of be more inclusive and bring in more minority voters, but they're kind of like stuck with white conservative voters because you know they can't just move away from them because they're still the largest voting bloc in the Republican Party. So
yeah, and they're going to be that for like I think I mean, even if you know a lot of them, even if once white people become a minority in America, there's still going to be a big, you know, a very significant big demographic, even if it's a minority one, but it's still big is of you know of the traditional, I guess you could say founding, I guess kind of like the traditional American people, you know, I guess of people who are not recent immigrants and their descendants and the such. You know, there's going to be a group of people who are always trying to, and there's always going to, you know, people who are kind of will assimilate into that as time goes on. As I said, like Hispanics, I think certain types of Hispanics, I think certain types of Asians might as well. I think and I think that's going to be how and I think with a mixture of what the GOP needs to do is embrace, I guess that they understand that you know there needs to be like a, I guess like a white identity. As for example, when a black person votes for the Republicans, it's kind of seen as you're voting against your own interests. What's going to happen is that as white people become a minority, they're going to start voting in a consolidated voting block because you know, for example, in like I don't know, in Norway, you know, no one sees themselves as white because everyone there is white, so it makes no sense. So, but in a that's why, for example, in America, for example, in like say the Congo, no one sees themselves as black because everyone there is black. So it doesn't make sense. But since black people are a minority, they've always had that sense of black identity about them, and they kind of vote based on like what's best for my interests. So and in America, it's always been historically white people kind of running the conversation because they've always been about 80 to 90% of the population. So what you know, they didn't really have thought of themselves as like a hive mind group. But as they become a minority, they'll start thinking like that, at least from what I'm seeing. And I think the Republican Party has to embrace that. And then I guess in being more inclusive to other types of minorities that will start trying to assimilate into that, I guess, into the broader, what they think is a traditional American, just as like Irish people have and the such, if that's what if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, if you go back further in time, white people didn't think of themselves as white. You know, they were, you know, some were Italian or Irish or German. The idea of kind of like a unified, quote, white America is like the last 100 years or so. Or I'm not entirely sure. I know that, you know, Irish people and Jewish people were not always considered white. But the definition of white has expanded over time. By the way, somebody we haven't mentioned with the 2020 primary is Cory Booker.
Oh yeah. What do you think about him? I actually think about him as I saw he seems very. I think he'll do well in the debates. I think he's very. I mean, he's very cringy sometimes. Like you remember the "I am Spartacus" moment?
I do not remember that. What was that about?
he said that he was gonna break. It was during like some sort of confirmation, some sort of hearing, and he's like he like broke like this very like the Senate rule. He's like he's like he was protesting something, and he's like, this is the closest I felt to a I am Spartacus moment or something. He was kind of he was like Eric Swalwell with his like Avengers comment, but like he sometimes he might trip himself up and act kind of goofy, but he's very I guess he's trying to act himself as like a much like Obama in a way, but I think that I don't know. I don't know exactly what to make him, but I think he'll do well in the debates. But I don't know what exactly his path forward is, because I think Kamala Harris, at least if he wants to take the black vote, but I think she has a hold on that. So she's kind of that's why he's kind of stuck at around 2%.
I know that Cory Booker's campaign release ad was very, very cringeworthy. And nobody liked it. But I think that you're right that he will do well in the debates. I think that he is a charismatic person. It's really weird because he's both charismatic, but he can also be cringe-inducing. So it's kind of weird how he is kind of both. Yeah, I think that he will go up a little bit in the polls. But do I think that he's going to make it to Super Tuesday? Probably not. I don't think that Cory Booker is. I mean, I don't. Maybe he will. I don't know. I don't think that. I would not bet on Cory Booker. Is what I'm saying. Also, Julian Castro. What do you think of him? Wait. For Booker. Also, the fact that he voted against importing pharmaceuticals, like that, is going to be a huge scarlet letter for him. Like he's never going to be able to live that down, or at least not this election cycle. Yeah. Progressives, like the North remembers.
At least for the progressive, yeah, they're. I think he became this, I guess, soured, at least for the progressives. So he has to kind of build. I don't think his, at least his chances his chances aren't with the progressives. I'll say that.
Yeah, he's definitely. He has a history of being a very corporate Democrat. So I don't think progressives are going to look past that. But yeah, so Julian Castro, what about him?
Like, I think he was like he was the first person to announce, I think, or the first person that I guess I heard that announced. Like, apparently there's some people that have been running for like months beforehand or something, but like this is the first person I saw that started announcing. I don't know what exact. I mean, he's just like this other. I mean, I think his way through is to consolidate, I guess, the Latino vote and maybe try to do well in like Nevada and try to do well maybe in California and in Texas and in some Super Tuesday states. But like, he's not. There's nothing. I don't really know what exactly because he seems he's not going anywhere, and I don't know exactly unless he tries to appeal to like Latinos or tries to appeal to some demographic in the Democratic Party. But I don't know exactly where he's going to do, because he seems to just not be doing anything. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that Castro is going to go very far at all. I think that in the past, maybe his best bet was that he would get a lot of delegates from Texas because he's from San Antonio. But Beto is still not from him. So
yeah. And even in his home state, he only polls like 2 or 3%, which is better than the 1% or 0% he always gets. But he even in his home state, it's like 2 or 3%. So it's not even like, oh, he's like third or fourth place. He's like still way behind.
Yeah, I would put Castro solidly in the tier 2, maybe even tier 3. I think tier 2. I think that I don't think that he's going to win. But interestingly, speaking of Texas, so Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro, in 2018, Beto O'Rourke almost won the Texas Senate election. For such a red state, he came startlingly close to beating Ted Cruz. And so it is interesting with the Electoral College. If Democrats can steal Texas, that's a complete game over for the Republicans, because without Texas, Republicans would not have been able to win the Electoral College a single time since like the 80s. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't think that'll happen in 2020, but I think it would be hilarious if
Yeah, because even if Trump wins all the states he did win, if due to like demographic change, Texas flips and everything else just stays the same as in 2016, they lose.
Yeah, I know this isn't going to happen, but I think it would just be like beautiful, hilarious if Trump won the popular vote, but the Democrats won the Electoral College.
Oh,
Like I would just be like that would just be like the most hysterical moment of the 21st century, or like because it's like, and by the way, if that did happen, Republicans would immediately abandon the Electoral College. Like,
yeah.
and people,
If Trump won the popular vote and like lost the electoral college, oh my God, he's gonna. You know, there's like people are like, oh, he's not gonna like leave the White House. I think he'll leave. I don't think he's that stupid, but like I think if he like won the popular vote and he still lost the electoral college, oh boy, I think that actually might be. I don't know. Like, what do you think is gonna happen with Trump if that happens? I know it's like theoretical, but like I don't know if that's gonna if he's. A lot of people are like, oh, he's not gonna step down, but I mean, I'm pretty sure he will. But like,
the idea of him not stepping down doesn't really matter because it's not like he can just refuse to leave office because there are mechanisms in place for like even if he has to be like forced out, like he will be forced out. Like there's really no way for him to just say, "Oh no, I'm still the president," because he would have to get like um, the the U.S. government, the bureaucracy, the military to agree that he's the president, and they're not going to agree to that. So that wouldn't work. But I do think that would be a great time to end the Electoral College if both Democrats and Republicans could agree that it's a stupid system.
do you think? Do you think that maybe? I mean, I know we're going to conspiratorial grounds, but like, do you think? What if like the Republican Congress people are like we want Trump to be like we still want him to be the thing, and we'll even though we know that the Democratic nominee won the Electoral College, we still don't want to. And the military sometimes is also kind of more right leaning, so like what do you think? What if like some parts of the government actually do want to keep Trump in power?
I don't think that that's going to happen, but I wouldn't put it past some Republicans to pull something like that because we know from like Mitch McConnell that there really is no room for consistency or so like with the Supreme Court thing in 2016, Mitch McConnell made up this rule that you can't vote on a new Supreme Court judge if it's during an election year. We have to let the American people decide. But then he was asked, if a Supreme Court justice dies or retires in 2020, would you fill the seat? He's like, oh yeah, of course we'd fill it. And just like this man has no soul. Like there's no integrity, there's no principle. All he thinks about is money and power.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say is that the GOP is a completely they're a really good opposition party. Like if you want the Democrats to get nothing, if you want to block Democrats at every turn, like they're good at that. But in terms of actually being a governing party, they're absolutely incompetent. Like they can't do anything. They might pass like some, something, but they're not gonna like in terms of like actually getting stuff done, they won't get anything done. So it's just kind of like I feel like it's kind of the opposite for the Democrats. From what I heard with a lot of left wing people, they're like, oh, they're very good at like pushing what they want, but like when the Republicans fight against them, they're like very weak on defense or something. So it's like, and then at the end we get nothing done. So
yeah. Speaking of which, Joe Biden, he recently was talking about how important it is to work with Republicans, and oh well, if we don't work with Republicans, then the only other option is a revolution or something. I'm like, no. The other option is that you push really aggressively to overpower them and try to get Democrats to cooperate with you, maybe win a few Republican votes. But I mean, I guess there are some cases where you can work with moderate Republicans, but in general, Republicans will never work with you because Obama he focused really heavily on working with Republicans and trying to appease them and be moderate. And every time they just spit in his eye,
which is kind of like weird because like Joe Biden was like at the center of that. Like he was in the he was in the in the presidency with Obama, and he understands that like the GOP isn't going to work with at least the current way it is not going to work with him. And it's a lot of people are like, oh, John Hickenlooper. There's one. There is a lot of things when Trump's like, oh, we're gonna fight against socialism and open borders and late term abortion. I'm like, yeah, I'm opposed to all that, but like, it's it seems to what was it? They got it. It slipped my man for some reason. I'm blanking. What were you talking about before? It just to jog my memory.
Oh, about how you can't work with Republicans because they'll just
So they'll say like John Hickenlooper's like, oh, they're the best thing the Republicans can talk against us is that we're socialists, so we can't elect a socialist person. I'm like, they're gonna call you socialist too. They're not gonna. That's the one thing I find really like boomer. Like the thing it's like the boomer mindset. Like everything's like everyone's a fascist, everyone's a socialist, and it's like, oh, it's like everyone wants everyone to be as extreme as possible. Like, oh, Trump has to be like a fascist and he has to be, like a Manchurian candidate. And and I, me tweeting out against him is me being like Rosa Parks. I'm so woke. And, they can't just accept that people are just have different ideas about the world than they do. And they just kind of have to try to like make everyone else to be the most diabolically evil person. And I think that's why there's a huge, bigger political polarization going on.
Even worse than Joe Biden in terms of, oh, we need to work with the Republicans. I don't know for certain, but I think that it was Eric Swalwell who said, if I'm elected, I'll make like half of my cabinet people Republicans. I'm like,
really?
Oh my God, you idiot. You absolute fucking idiot. Like, I don't know if it was Swalwell, but like somebody was like, oh, I don't know if it was like half, but they were like, oh, I'm going to appoint Republicans to some cabinet positions. And it's like, why would you, like, we can't have a system where Republicans fight tooth and nail and as dirty as possible, and Democrats are like, well, let's compromise on literally everything, even when we don't have to. Like, anyway, so we're kind of approaching the 2-hour mark. So
yeah, so let's wrap it up. Yeah.
Your least favorite candidate?
Least favorite candidate in the Democrat? John Hickenlooper. Well, nah. It depends. It depends on how I feel. Either Eric Swalwell or John Hickenlooper. Everyone else, people who are lower than that are just too irrelevant to comment about.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I will say that in terms of who I intensely dislike, I would have to say Klobuchar.
Oh yeah, don't say. Hopefully she does. She's not watching this, so she'll throw like her fucking comb at you or whatever.
Oh yeah. So not only like she's just so I don't want to sound like mean or anything, but like she's just not likable. Like she has this. She's very off-putting. She apparently is very mean in terms of like she was abusive to her staff. She would scream at them. She'd throw stuff at them. And when people asked her about this, she was like, "Oh well, we need to be tough. We need to be tough on Putin." And another thing is that she's one of the only candidates who's like, "Oh no, we can't do 4-year college because we can't afford that." It's like, well, you voted for Trump's increase to the defense spending, and the increase to that, not the entire defense budget, but just the increase was more than the cost of paying for public college. So no, she's just, and she's like a bunch of weird history of like really weird positions, and yeah, no, she's my least favorite. I think that so her, Joe Biden, John Delaney, whoever that is, Eric Swalwell, Hickenlooper. Yeah.
I'm gonna say a little bit of a secret. You know, I kind of like Dolan a little. You know, that unknown troll, but like, you know, I kind of like him a little bit. I'll be quite honest. I mean, he's not one of my. So the thing with him is that there's there's a few. If you have you seen his what he there's a few things I actually agree with him on his platform, but he's just as a candidate though, like outside his policy positions, he's like very like bland. He's like oatmeal. So as a candidate, I think he's bad, but I think his policies are sometimes good. But he's not the most terrible person. I'm gonna admit that, you know, you could hate on me, but I kind of like him a little bit, just a little bit though.
Who are we talking about? John Mulaney, the comedian?
I forgot already. I forgot who who I liked. Um, yeah, who do you what's a position that the Democrat, if a Democratic candidate picks, that you rule out voting for them? Like if they say something, like I know if like they say like something that they is like traditionally like, how do I say it? What's something that makes them like kind of, if they don't support it or they support something, they you ruled out voting for them?
My litmus test, Medicare for all.
Yeah, yeah.
As in being against Medicare for all. As in, like, if they're against it, then I'm against them.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's definitely a big one.
And by the way, I'm not fundamentally against like some other form of universal health care. Like maybe we could have like a multi-payer system like Germany, but you don't start with that. Like Obama started with Obamacare with it, like so he started with kind of like a Swiss style system,
Mhm.
and the Republicans just undermined it in every way. And that independent from Connecticut, like what's his name, the independent from Connecticut a long time ago.
John Lederman.
Yes, Lieberman, Joe Lieberman. Yeah, so he threatened to filibuster for the public option. So then the public option was gone, and so he's like, "His no individual mandate," and the Supreme Court trying to rule that unconstitutional. Or no, I'm sorry, Republicans are trying to get the Supreme Court to rule that. And he's like, "Oh, and we have the Medicaid expansion. Oh, well, states can opt out of that. So you need to start out with the most. You need to start with Medicare for all, and then maybe, just maybe, you can get more moderate than that as a compromise. But you
Yeah.
need to push for Medicare for all, and you need to shift the conversation towards Medicare for all."
Yeah. Yeah, health. I mean, and that's like the thing with healthcare is that, you know, even in Medicare for all, there could be a debate on like, okay, but what type of coverage is covered by this singular government insurance plan? And when things are covered, like which groups of people is it completely free? Which groups of people maybe you pay maybe $10? Like for example, in the UK, like glasses are free for children under 16, but it costs a little bit for everyone above that. So there's like, you know, we could debate on like what the benefits are, which groups are included. You know, like for example, you know, Bernie's bill includes like, you know, illegal immigrants and, you know, a lot of other people, but, you know, we could debate on who gets included, who get what type of benefits are even there, how much the costs are. Maybe we could have like a Japanese system where the Japanese government pays for maybe 70% of it, and you pay for 30%, and they negotiate it. But, you know, there's a huge debate to be had on just even with just Medicare for all. And, you know, like, you know, the way my perfect, I guess, Medicare for all, like, or just healthcare system, I would like rebrand it AmeriCare. So, you know, how if it's like Obamacare, Trump care, I would have, you know, America Care. So something like that. And I would have it where it would be a singular insurance system that every American citizen would be enrolled in. And it would be a basic coverage plan that would, but however, and that everyone is enrolled in. Now, if you want to get, and we could debate on like, you know, there'll be like, you know, details on like, well, these things are covered fully for, say, the poor and the children and the elderly, and these things cost this much, and some things are 70-30, some things are 70 or 90-10, 90% paid by the government, 10% paid by you, or some things are just completely free. But there'll be a basic plan that everyone gets, right? And then from that, if you want to get supplemental insurance, you could get whatever you want that maybe covers the tiny bits of costs, or maybe covers something that isn't covered by the government plan. And then I would use the massive savings from that from that, like reducing administrative costs to ensuring that every doctor and nurse is able to get free medical school like they do in France. That's kind of be my ideal system for healthcare.
Yeah, whatever system we get towards, I do think that even if there is maybe a hypothetically better system, I think that the simplest way to do it would just be to remove the age limit for Medicare. So Medicare is a system that we already have.
Mm-hmm.
So just take what we already have and make it for everyone, not just people over 65.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's much better to work with something that is pre-existing. But in terms of candidates who just come out and say, oh, I'm against Medicare for all, and they use Republican talking points about people losing their health insurance as if to imply that they're not gaining health insurance or that they're not going to have a replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this one candidate, whoever it was, who got booed for saying that socialism is not the way, and of course he means social democracy is not the way forward. Oh, you're going to take health insurance away from 150 million people. I'm just like, why are you even running, whoever you are?
It's like I don't know who's like who's like, oh my god, I love my Antietam health insurance. Like no one's like like that. They want their the health care. They don't want the health insurance. The another thing they say that's weaselly is healthcare. He's like, one thing a lot of people is like, we need to ensure universal access to healthcare. I'm like, that's not the problem, you doofus. It's everyone could go to the hospital. The point is that when they go to the hospital, they get they get purged from all their money. When they have to to get anything done there. So the problem is costs. It's not any like access to be. It's we don't live in a country where there's like no health health facilities anywhere. We have plenty. It's just that we don't, or we could still build more health clinics, but there's no it's not access. They're trying to there's some weasel words that are trying to sneak in, but yeah, they need a. I think I think Amy Klobuchar is just this kind of this weirdo. I think she's the weirdest one. Eric Swalwell's the more doofy one, the more doofus one, and then John Hickenlooper is kind of the more vassal, nothing void thing. I think those are the three worst candidates in my opinion. But I think the biggest litmus test for me, if someone that would, as I said, I'm someone on the right. So for example, if Julian Castro gets elected, he said that he would decriminalize all border crossings. So he would essentially make it not a crime to cross the border. If he was running, I would still vote for. I wouldn't vote for him in the general election. I wouldn't vote for anyone who supports physical reparations. So I would rule out voting for Marianne Williamson, or even though she's not going to get elected. So there's a few things that that I would rule out voting for them in the general election. But yeah, but right now I think we'll just have to see how everything goes with the primary as the election goes on. I think once we have 2 or 3 debates and people start getting used to all the candidates, we'll start getting a better picture on who's gonna get the mantle for the Democrats.
Yeah, so we are at about the 2-hour mark. So I guess my final question is, what do you think of the controversy where in the late 90s and early 2000s, Tulsi Gabbard said extremely homophobic things?
Can you describe a little bit what exactly she said? I know she said some things that were questionable, but what exactly was she mentioning about?
She would talk about, and again, this is 15, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She was talking about how there are these homosexual extremists who are trying to push their agenda on us, and her father especially was extremely homophobic, and I think that she was against legislation that was against gay bullying or something. I think she was against gay marriage. My position is that she is so pro-gay now, and she is 100% record from the Human Rights Campaign. It seems like she's genuinely evolved on the issue, so I really couldn't care less.
Mm-hmm.
15 or 20 years ago, she was anti-gay. She she's completely come around from that, and she has proven that she is now a friend to the gay community. So, I think that when you're considering something that's so relevant, first you have to ask how long ago it was, and then you have to ask how relevant is it. So, let's say hypothetically that Tulsi Gabbard were very iffy on gay rights. Like, let's say that she was against anti-discrimination laws. Let's say that she was like one of the last ones to accept gay marriage, and that maybe she's like, oh, let's let the state decide gay marriage, and then and then we find out that 20 years ago she said all these homophobic things. Well, that would be a huge problem because now it's relevant, But now that she's the opposite, it's not relevant anymore,
I get my question is I guess let me is in terms of in the I guess the gay I don't want to sound gay or I don't want to sound like I'm saying something weird here, but the gay agenda, I guess the agenda of the LGBT community. What there's a lot of things that I kind of disagree. Some things that they're pushing that are kind of for example, they especially in the there's some things I don't like. For example, I obviously support at least in the having the same protections against for example, what's a good for example, there's a lot of people saying, oh, there's children should be able to transition their gender when they're young, and I am absolutely against that. What a lot of I'm also a lot of people are arguing that's that's actually a good thing, but I disagree with that. I also disagree with allowing transgender for people who are males thinking they're females to work to play in women's sports, because what you figure out is that there's all these things coming out where so all these women they're getting trounced by this man who says he's a woman, but he's just beating all them up, and they're and I think it's just, I mean, to me, this is, I guess, where my right-wing ideology comes in. It's just that I kind of think males and females are just fundamentally different. They're different, and there's not trying to make them, I guess, equal is, I guess, a false thing that what we should do is that take what males and females do on average and make them, are they able to be compatible with each other? And so there's just, I guess, there's just some things I don't really, but I agree with the basics about it. So I guess it depends on how far you think in terms of Tulsi Gabbard, what she, for example, if she's against, if she thinks the gay agenda is giving them, I guess, hate crime, oh, how dare they don't want the, hate crimes or letting them adopt or something, then yeah, that'd probably be for progressives, that'd be a problem, right? But I think there could be certain disagreements about how far exactly you support. I guess there's I don't think you should. I think there's a debate on how much you support it. Or what do you think? Sorry if I'm rambling.
I mean, I sympathize with the point about I don't think that children should be taking hormone blockers, and I don't think that MTF trans women should be doing sporting competition with cis women. So I agree with that. I don't agree with how you phrased all of that necessarily, but I kind of agree with your position. So if Tulsi Gabbard were if she came out are you okay?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I just
sorry, I have some noises. Yeah. So if Tulsi Gabbard if she had if she were very much iffy on trans people, and if she were if there were red flags and she were one of the weaker candidates on LGBT rights, and then these comments from 20 years ago resurfaced, that would be a deal breaker, because then they're relevant.
Yeah, it would be, especially what you're saying is that if you're an LGBT if you're really into that like advocacy, then what you're saying is exactly true. It's like if you want to, but like now that she's like completely for it, it's kind of if she's still kind of iffy on it, but and then these comments resurface, then it would be a problem, as you said. But yeah, especially if you actually care about it, it would be a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people I know who were very upset by those comments, but I just think that it's so going back to what we were talking about with Biden's record with like 40 years ago and desegregation and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's relevant because he is a much more moderate centrist Democrat, and even recently he's talking about he has like these like warm memories about working with segregationists, and so it's like he's still running as like the moderate uh, candidate. But if Biden were like a solid progressive, then and you could really see genuine change in his political history, then I wouldn't really care that 40 years ago he was like against busing desegregation and stuff. And but
I think it's kind. I think that recent story that came out with him is kind of. I think what he was trying to refer to, because he's been there for a long time. I mean, he's old, as we know, but he's been in the Senate for such a long time that he's been there when there was like Democrats who were still segregationists, and he said that I don't think he said that. Oh, I agreed with what they said. I think he was saying that even though we had different worldviews, we still kind of came together when we needed to come together to get things done. And I think it's like, oh, I think we can still do that. I think the problem with that, at least in his thinking, is that he thinks there has to be a way to revive that, I guess, bipartisan compromise, like where we're actually not so polarized. But I don't think he if he just comes in, he gets elected, and nothing changes. Like I don't think he understands that. No, there's not going to be there's not that age of when people like there's less polarization is not there anymore.
yeah, I don't think that it's going to come back either unless there's another huge political realignment. So, in terms of like the party system model, it's like the current party system that we have requires both parties to become more extreme, or at least that's how it has worked out. And I don't think that I don't think that they'll become more moderate. And I think that yeah, maybe the Democrats will be more moderate in some ways, but I think that'd be a mistake. I think they'll continue losing if they continue the Hillary Clinton, Obama, Bill Clinton
Yeah.
type thing.
And the same thing with the GOP. If they're running on like, oh, the America is let's keep America the way it is. Like America is already great, and we will get a President Sanders or a President we will get a demo. If the GOP is just a bunch of incompetent people who their only thing is we're going to go to war with Iran and we're going to pass corporate tax cuts. That's their because if you ever see like if you ever see like actually like people who still support Donald Trump on Twitter, it's like, oh, it's just so vapid and very there's nothing. It's so just so empty, and it's just very it's kind of almost not a cult of personality, just a very like they're like, oh, I'm pro First Amendment, pro Second Amendment, pro gun, make hashtag MAGA, hashtag build the wall. It's kind of like they embrace all the kind of like the slogans. They just don't know the meaning. They just don't have an ideology outside the slogans and everything. They're getting spoon fed and all that. But yeah, so yeah, hey, thank you so much for or do you have anything else to say before we end up?
No, I'm pretty much that's pretty much all. And yeah, it has been 2 hours, I guess. Do you have any other questions about the primary or anything? Or
I let me check. I made a little bit of a list, but I think we went through all of it. Yeah, we yeah, I think this is. I think that I think that was all. I think I guess my last question is if say Bernie well, I guess if oh yeah, I guess you did go into it. So what would there be any I guess my last thing would be, would there be any a case where say if there was say a moderate if say it was a. Is there any case in your? Would there any be a situation where you would vote for the Republicans over the Democrats?
Realistically, no. This election cycle definitely not. But like, if there's some crazy, ridiculous realignment in like 2024, I guess what you're asking is, if the Republicans hypothetically run a candidate who I more agree with than the Democrat, then yeah, I would vote for them. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I understand.
I guess if you mean like, oh, am I like a partisan hack? No, no. Like, if the Republicans run somebody who I think is a better candidate and I agree with them more than the Democrat, then yeah, I would consider voting for them. And
Yeah.
I just don't see that as, or maybe if I change my political views, but in terms of this election cycle, no, there is not a single Democratic primary candidate who is worse than Trump, or even the same as Trump. Like they're all significantly better than Trump. So in terms of this election, no, definitely not.
Even that unknown man.
The unknown, whoever you're talking about, no, no, he is significant. He's still better than Trump, even though I don't like him.
Yeah. 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 So, hey, thank you so much for coming on. It's a great honor to, have you on.
Thank you.
Probably it's always a great pleasure. I hope this was a good talk. I know I trip around my words sometimes, but I'm not a great, I guess, extrovert or whatever, but, I hope I try my best, and I hope I gave my viewers a good time and a good conversation along with my guest. Next time we're talking, I'll probably be in like Tehran after Trump starts World War III or whatever, but because I'm joining the military. But hopefully that doesn't end up like that. That's not what it's going to end up next time we talk. But hey, thank you so much for being on. It's been a great honor.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, let me end the broadcast.